if you just recently came in on the screen, you have our standard housekeeping.
Ah,
Um, again, Q&A. If you have questions, go to Q&A. If we don't get to it during the session, we'll follow up with email. But we should be able to see it in the Q&A, or you can put it in the chat. The chat will only be seen by the host and the presenters, which is a change from the On24 and the WebEx. All right. Let me get to the next Focus Friday is February. I
that's
got a
right.
spelling thing there.
We got one extra O.
February. And again, this is another one where Mr. Blood is going to be all by himself, so be gentle with him.
We'll have fun.
Because I'm going to be, yes, on another cruise.
I told him he needed to get to just join in from the ship. You know?
Yeah, but
We can
you
buy
know how the
drinks.
ship Wi-Fi is.
Right. We buy drinks for everybody.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
I'll get the drink package.
That's right.
For today, some emails went out with the right schedule, some went out with the old schedule. This is what we're going to be talking about today. So Hannah's going to talk about Summit Roadshow preview, and then Walt's going to talk about some dialogue manager techniques, that specifically what we use in the FOCLOG menuing system, if you know that product. I'm going to talk about some table processing, and then Walt's going to follow up with things you can use today. All right. Now,
Right.
Hannah, if you'd like to take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen real quick, if that's great. Thank you. Let's see. Go ahead and do that here. All right, so I am super, super excited to invite all of you to our 2024 Summit Roadshow series. I know that many of you have been to the IBI Summit over the years and loved it, miss it, want to see it again. And I am thrilled to let you know that it is coming to you in the form of a mini roadshow. So we're hitting 4 cities this year. We're going to be providing you with an exclusive look at what's to come with the IBI product portfolio, all the new features and everything coming out. We're excited to get to share those with you firsthand. We are also going to have product-led breakout sessions where we answer lots of questions that you all have had and really provide more of a hands-on training type feel with those sessions. We'll also be having hands-on labs that will be led by different ATS and SE individuals who you all work with on a regular basis. And you can also book time with an expert in our expert hours. So we'll have breakout sessions and hands-on labs running throughout the day, but also expert hours running the entire day that you can book in advance with any questions you might have about your deployment, or maybe you're interested in seeing how new features run in the latest version of WebFOCUS or Focus or any of your other products you may have. And we can show you how that would work for you. So super excited about that. Our first stop is going to be Boston, Massachusetts on April 11th. So come to Boston, come see me. We'll have several other product people there, and it's going to be a good time. Our next stops will be Washington, D.C., as well as Chicago, and we'll be closing it all out in New York City at the end of the year. So again, super excited about this. This is coming soon. We are wanting to bring the experience of Summit in a miniaturized version to you all on the road that's accessible, easy to get to for you all. And we're very excited to get to spend a whole day with you guys in, goodness, I guess 2.5 months now. It's coming up soon. So registration will be opening in the next few weeks, hopefully for that. But on our website, if you guys haven't already seen our new website, please go to www.ibi.com. Check out our new website. It's fantastic, very sleek. You go under customers down to events, and you can see all kinds of events. You'll see our Focus Fridays on there. You'll see our virtual user groups, and you'll also see these in-person events that we're going to be having for 2024. So coming soon, registration will be hitting your inboxes very soon, and very excited to share this with you guys. So thank you, Walters, for letting me share a little bit about that.
So Hannah, there's a question.
Yeah.
Where's any city in the South or West?
Well, Washington, D.C. is kind of in the South. So I live in Georgia, and we definitely consider D.C. the South. So right now, D.C. is the South, Chicago is the Midwest. This year, we don't have anything on the far West Coast, but we'll see in years to come. again, come to one of these events. Let's see how we can expand this further. We definitely want to see you there and get that in-person, hands-on training and learning that you guys have been asking for. We want to be able to give that to you.
Is there
And
any
they want to
plans-
know, are they going to be able to see the Walters there?
I don't know, Walters. We'll have to see.
Is there any plans for possibly virtualizing any of these so that somebody who is in the West could join in to see?
At this point, no, it's exclusive in-person content, but we'll definitely see for the future. But we've had a lot of requests to bring Summit back. So we're trying to do that in the form of a roadshow, and depending on attendance, we'll see what we can do for a larger event next year. But this year we have this roadshow. So if you want to see something bigger, come to one of these events.
Yeah, I think a cruise would be good.
Cruise. Well, let's join Walter Brangold next month.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I see the first one's in April. I'll be on a cruise then too.
Oh, wow.
Walter has gotten cruise crazy. So
That's awesome. Well,
As long as they keep giving them to me, I'll go.
not bad. Not bad. All right.
Thanks, Hannah.
Well, thanks,
yeah,
Hannah.
thank you guys. And feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions. Yeah, I'm excited.
Angie, you want to
Yes, sir.
pipe in and say anything?
Honestly, you guys covered it all already. I am hoping to be at that April summit, so I hope I am seeing some of you there as well. And yeah, I think an IBI cruise would be a fantastic idea. Let's plan it.
There
I
you
think
go.
we're all in favor of that.
That's a good one. That's
That'd
I
be
think it'd be
like
cost. I think it'd be
depend on
cost per.
the length.
Go ahead.
Depend on the length, it could be like 7 days of direct contact with your IBI representatives. It would be great.
There's a question about the cost.
Expected cost to attend. That's a great question. So we are actually providing this to you free. Like, you get there and it's yours. We can't cover travel. We aren't covering a hotel stay, but the day of event, we are providing you with meals, and it's going to be in an event center. So it's a center that has space for events being run, and they provide the food and everything. It's going to be great.
So it'd be like breakfast or
We'll have breakfast, lunch, and then it's a cafe bar that they have. So like a coffee bar.
cool.
So it'll be good.
Thanks.
It'll be really good. I'm excited. So yes, it's free. So come. It's gonna be good.
All right. Well, moving right along. Let's see. I'm going to try to share my session here. Actually, let me start this. And share this. Actually, let's no, wrong way. Wrong share. So let me just do real quick. Let me share first. It seems to be going here. So share this guy. And let's get this around. All right. Yep, it's there. You can see me, right?
We can see you.
Good. All right. Excellent. All right. I wanted to spend a little time talking about some of the dialog manager techniques that we used to build the menuing system that we use for reporting on the FOCLOG product in FOCUS. It's a FOCUS product. It's using dialog manager to build a menuing system, and there's some techniques in there that are useful whether you're interactive, batch, WebFOCUS, or FOCUS. Some techniques for handling, actually creating, using the same space, the same variables for multiple things. And I want to just demonstrate and show you some of this so you get some kind of an idea as some of the flexibility that's available with Dialog Manager. So let's just cruise in here. FOCLOG, just to give you a heads up, FOCLOG is a monitoring tool that's built into FOCUS. It's now required on the FOCUS product for anybody that's licensing FOCUS. It monitors what you're doing with the product, and it keeps a log file, which is extremely small, keeps it in memory, writes it out when your session is done, and holds that data for analysis. Analysis can be done either on mainframe, or it can be done on PC, it can be done with FOCUS, or it can be done with WebFOCUS. Now, The primary screen for the FL menu for the menuing system looks like this, and don't be scared. This is a normal mainframe screen. It's 175 years old, as you can recognize. It's dark with light colored type. But this is the way that mainframe Focus still looks for a while. Now, you'll notice that we have here a number of things in this menuing system. On the top, we have this list of dimensions. We have a template here, and the idea behind Dialog Manager basically is to reuse code, reuse functionality. And in this particular case, we're building a template for all of the menus that are going to be distributed. And it's going to be, what's in the menu is going to be based upon the dimension. See here that we actually have a number of different dimensions that are available to you. In fact, the reports are different on each dimension. Notice that the little stars under the word user. This is something that we'll be kind of showing you. One of the techniques that we have a way of indicating where you are. Also in the menu, we have, in the template, we have a list of the reports that you can actually run. And these reports are all directly executable. You basically plug the number in the select box and hit the enter key, and you're gone. Your function keys, which are available primarily, are big use in the record-based systems, in the old mainframe systems. Function keys are very useful, and they are on the bottom of the screen. For any report that we have another template. Okay, and this is another template. This is a template that's going to basically collect the parameters that are required for that report. Now, these are all collected dynamically on screen. Do they have to be? No. This technique can be used either in the foreground like this, or it can be used in batch, provided you have the data that you need. You don't have to necessarily collect it. In this case, we're collecting a date range for the report because we actually can screen on the date. We can limit the date that we're looking at. We're looking for a specific time aggregation level. Are we going to aggregate it quarter, month, week? Where is it going to go? We have two ways that we can put this out to screen. We can put it out to a printer. We can stick it in a hold file. We have all kinds of formats that we can put it into. Any format that you can hold to inside of Focus, you can basically plug in here. Are there optional sorts? And this is a kind of an interesting one because these reports all have, as you can see, standardized. We're looking for dates. So the idea behind the dates ultimately is to use that as your primary sort. There may be some other things that you want to add, and there is a way to add an optional sort into the request without breaking the request and radically altering it. So and in fact, we'll be taking a look at that. Finally, there's do I want to limit the data? Well, I can do that. Now, just to take you quickly through one of these examples, we're going to take a look at varying the sort columns on the FOCLOG report. And that particular one we'll take a look at FOCLOG 403, report 403. And for 403 basically has data sorted by user and session date. And it's collecting the number of records, the number of lines of output, the duration of the session, and the CPU usage. It's doing it, as you can see, by date and by user. Now, then this is basically where it's done. You'll see that there's an optional sort that's available here. This optional sort basically allows me to add an additional sort on top of what we're currently looking at. And ultimately, what we want to do here is we want to change it without changing the structure of the report. Right? I still want my users by date. All right, that's the basic report. But I also may want to basically look at something. I may want to sort by duration or by CPU seconds. And I want to do that at a high enough level so that it makes some sense. I may want to take a look at overall the highest CPU level usage without necessarily changing the sort order with the high order sort, my visual high order sort being my user and my date. And I can do that actually very easily. And what we're going to be doing with Dialog Manager here is actually building this sort, building the code for it, and passing it in. Now, there's not only do we build the selection criteria right there, and that selection criteria is dynamic, but also the column header that is going to indicate where the extra sort actually lives. And you can see we're doing that with those stars in the sort, which we're basically placing on top of the column, so we can identify that this, in fact, this column is the primary sort. the way we do this in Dialog Manager is fairly simple. We're going to basically set up a list of the fields that we can sort, and you can see that I've got a lot of different sorts here. In fact, there's an amper sort for each of the reports that exists. And what we're looking at is what fields we can use, what other fields we can use to indicate as an alternate or optional sort. Where there's an X, I know that I can use that as an optional sort. And one of the things that we set this so that as soon as I see which report I'm in, which I do, I can add that line that asks for the optional sort along with the data that's needed there, which sorts are available, and add the little selection box that basically tells the customer which one you can pick. Now, this is the thing that we just created. It's called, in the Dialog Manager code that we're working with, it's called amper ask sort. And we're building this effectively, dynamically, when the report is called. In other words, when I ask to run this report, coming into this particular screen is going to have dynamically built that duration CPU and records and lines box. That's dynamic. It doesn't exist anywhere. That changes. The template has the availability to put it there, and if the report indicates that it has that based upon the sort list, it will show up. It also has a little amper sort cell, which is a variable that is going to be collected primarily to tell me which one I want to use. And you'll notice it's using a single character, typically the first character in this case. Now, what we're doing here, we know we're using amper sort rep up there at the top to indicate which report we're in. And we're going to look at that to determine what we actually have the ability to sort on. And if you remember, for 403, there were 3 X's. So as we actually scroll through this Dialog Manager, and this is going to be done line by line, we're going to basically be adding to ask sort duration, CPU, EXCP, and lines in the original case. If there's nothing in here, this is actually built dynamically. It builds as we go. So whatever it finds, it adds on to the end. And if there's nothing there, it's going to basically say there are no available extra sorts. The index variable basically is what is used to capture the actual report. Index variables are extremely useful and can be used when you have lots of varieties of the same thing. And Dialog Manager, that is the way you get variation, and it's very easy to control and very easy to use. It's referenced, as you can see, with the index itself can actually be built with Dialog Manager variables. So it doesn't necessarily have to be literal. It can be a variable itself. Now, what we're doing as we go through with this if test, we're basically determining whether we have something in there. If there's an X in that data value that we're reading, if there's an X there, I'm going to add some code in this ask sort string. And if not, I'm going to leave it blank. I'm just going to pick up what it is without adding anything. And I basically build that. Now, when it comes to actually using it, I'm going to be using a number of global variables. I'm going to be looking at amper sort cells to see what it is. And that amper sort cell was that little thing on the side. I'm going to determine what it is with that if test. And as soon as I've done that, I'm going to set the amper sort by to one of these values. Right now, we'll be using that value further on down. Now, once I've got that, I'm going to mark the column. If the sort by has that value, I'm going to mark the column. I'm going to add the sort to the top of that column so that when we display the report, that variable will be there and will in effect indicate that that's the column that's being used for the optional sort. Finally, we're adding a sort here. So the trick here ultimately is I have to have a global variable in here in the template that's going to basically add the sort functionality. Now, I'm doing this based upon what I'm seeing in the sort by, and you'll notice that the code I'm bringing in here, so I'm bringing in a by highest in this particular case, a field, and a no print. And I'm doing that because I don't necessarily want to add this field as a sort field. I want it displayed, but I want it sorted, but I don't necessarily want to display it as I would normally display it over on the left-hand side. I want to leave it pretty much where it is. And that's exactly the way you do it with the no print. All right, which is in the WebFOCUS world, you're going to hide it, right? And you can see here that I have this ability now to basically add this on top of what's currently in the report. The currently in the report is already exists by users and by date. Finally, the report, just to take a quick look at it, this is what it looks like. You'll notice that we've got a lot of computes. The bulk of the calculation is being done in computes. We're doing a sum. We're basically going to be calculating the number of records, number of lines, the session duration, and you'll see it includes in here that would normally be bringing in additional calculation. That calculation that's coming in there ultimately is going to convert the numeric value of the duration into an alpha value that we can use for display. It's not a normal, we're actually going to change the display and we're going to make it look a specific way. And that's being done with the includes. And for each case, we're bringing in the global variable for the optional sort. And in some cases, it's going to be populated. In some cases, it's not. It depends entirely on, at the time that you run the request, what values you pass in. And ultimately, with CRT form, which is what we're working with, or with fixed form, which is what you would be working with batch, anything you pass, any global variable that you pass in on the parameter list will be substituted. So you have the ability to use this in building FOCEX in requests. You can do it with CRT form. You can do it outside of, you can basically do it entirely in batch. So it's available pretty much everywhere, the concept here. Yeah.
I had a random thought and somebody actually asked the question of what I was thinking, which is kind of scary. Do you need the .eval on the amper sort text? And so that's their question. My question was, does the global variable support the .eval? Because I know it's supported on local.
No. I think .eval is only available for local variables because globals exist. All right, globals in fact are like lets. If you know what a let is, we actually store them. Globals have a real life. It's not as if they don't exist or they can be created on the fly. Once they exist, you can't get rid of them. The only way you can get rid of them is by doing a let clear. A local variable is much more fleeting, and in that case, there are cases where it might not exist, or you might have changed the code underneath the covers, and you do need to reevaluate. With globals are a lot more durable, which is one of the reasons we use them. Now they're more durable. And in the WebFOCUS world, globals are the norm, right? We need to be able to pass these things among FOCEX and around. We need to be able to pass them around. And because of that, the global variable has always been used in the WebFOCUS world. Does it mean you can't use locals? No, you can use locals, but they're very limited. They're only they will live for the life of a single FEX. Now that FEX may or may not be the only thing that's being run. In which case, it may. If you're running 3 FEXs in the same one, if you've got a bunch of includes, they're not all going to be there unless you're working with globals. And so you got to be careful. I mean, so do you need the .eval there? No, you don't. Okay, let's see. Anything else? No.
So for WebFOCUS, where we have non-persistent connections,
right,
and you have a global variable, how long does that global variable stay around, or because I know through the client and through the WebFOCUS, it's a little different. Maybe Angie.
Yeah, that's from what I remember. And correct me if I'm wrong, Angie. We use cookies for global variables.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. So there's settings in the WebFOCUS admin console that basically say, remember my global variables through my entire WebFOCUS session or not. And then based on that, we use cookies to renew the global variable value as needed
Yeah.
through all of our requests to the server.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Cool. Cool. Now, just these globals basically can either be blank or sort, or the sort, so basically indicate which one lives. The ampersand sort text is either going to be blank or it's actually going to include that by highest field no print as the highest level sort. So that's going to be the highest level sort that's going to be operational. And that's ultimately what we wanted to do here. We didn't want to change the design of the report, but we wanted to be able to allow you to sort the data in the numeric columns in a way that would be a little bit more meaningful. Right. You'll notice also in this report that there's additional globals that we use. We use globals in the header. We use globals for the data range, which would have been picked up off of that initial CRT form screen, as well as the FOCUS, the name of the FOCUS, the footer, and also the output format, what we're going to do with it. That's all globalized. All right.
Well,
Ultimately, yeah.
another question. The comment is, I understood that global variables, is it in effect for all users? And no, it should only be in effect for the current user.
Right. Yeah, it's only your session. Okay. If you want something available to all users, what you need to do is put it someplace that all users will hit.
Yeah, if you put it at an SPROF.
At SPROF is one. If you're using, if you've got group profiles, you could put it in there. These things can be executable. Once they're, typically the profile, the dialog manager variables are available to you in your sessions. All right, and they're either local or they're global. But if you want to pass them, you can do that, but you have to do it as we start the product. Right, and at that level, you can basically enforce certain values. Now, bear in mind, they can be changed. If somebody knows about them, those things can be changed. It's not as if you're locking it to something. So if you think you can basically set a global variable to something and nobody can change it, be careful, because they can. If they know about it, they can probably find it and change it. So that's not necessarily the way to do that. Right. There are other ways to handle that kind of a situation. Including the parking. You could potentially park that into a file, park the data value into a file, or make it totally dynamic, and do a dynamic read, and get it at the time that you come up in either in an include or something like that. Now, just another look at the same thing, and this is a somewhat more recent version of this. This is exactly the same thing. What we're doing is adding the column heading, and this is the same code. Again, this is slightly different, but not that much. The drop down basically is going to pick up the sort selection. We're going to pick up the duration, the sort by, and finally the sort text. Now, we're not limited by what we put in here. As long as we've got legitimate code, we can do anything we want with this by highest. So it could be highest, it could be by lowest, by top. It's up to you. You've got a lot of control here. If you want to change things, it's certainly possible to change it. Now, the FL menu that we distribute is code, and it's something that can be looked at and changed. And it's up to you if you want to do that. You certainly can. It's not locked, and as a result, you can have lots of fun with this if you want. All right, I think that's really all I want to talk to about this particular report. Not bad. Okay. All right. Any additional questions? Okay, no questions. Walter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Walter, you're muted.
Mm-hmm. Walter, you're muted.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
I was just talking to myself anyway. I had to find my session. Table overview. And start. And minimize. Move that around. Oop. All right, now come back over here, and then I should be able to share. There and there. All right. I think I'm in order. All right, I'm going to talk about today just an overview of table, a report request. What is it? What are you going to find in it? Again, we've had in our evaluations in the past, we want to see some more basic stuff, and this is kind of going into that. So what are we going to talk about? Components of a report request. You have grouping and sorting and collation, which is basically all synonyms. How are you going to do the sorting? Are you going down the page, across the page? Are you summing? Are you aggregating? Or are you showing detail? You can put subheads, subfeet. You can put headers, footers, columns. What information do you want to see in your report? So we call those verb objects. So you have fields that are physically in your file via the master, or you might have fields that you calculated using define. In addition, in your columns that you're referencing, you can do your own calculations using compute. You can do totals at the report level, at the subtotal level, at the aggregation level, headings and footings. We have report headings and footings, and we have page headings and footings. What's the difference? Well, the page heading and footing shows at the top or bottom of every page. The report heading and footing only shows the heading. The report heading is on the very first page, and the report footing is only at the very end. So here's our syntax for table. Table file, file name. You got your verb, sum, print. If this were more interactive, I'd be asking how many verbs do we have in the product? And I get many answers from 5 to 7, but really there's only 3. Actually, there's 2. You got count, you got print, and you have sum. There's a lot of synonyms for sum. And then we also have print. We have list, which is another detail verb. And on the list is basically a print with a no print on the folk list column. We got the sortings. You got bys and across, whether you're going down the page or across the page. Where conditions, filters, headings, footings, subhead. Notice how before I jump ahead, styling and then end. So notice I have headings, footings, subheads, all that toward the end. You can put your heading at the very top, table, file, car, heading, and then your code. I tend to put it before the end. I put it after the verb and the verb objects, and I'll explain to that once we get a little closer into some of the examples. So, of course, my favorite file is the car file because it only has 18 rows and a few columns, and we should all be pretty much familiar with the data at this point. So the table file car statement identifies the file or table that you're reporting against. You can only issue table if you have a master or a synonym. Then we have our verb and verb objects. So here we're doing a sum, and I keep jumping ahead, so I'm going to not say as much. We're summing dealer cost, retail cost, and we're doing a compute. So what type of report is this? Is it a detail or an aggregation? Well, we're doing a sum, so it's aggregation. The fields and columns we want to see, we got 3 fields basically that we're going to see. Detail cost, dealer cost, retail cost, and profit. Okay, let's see. All right, this has nothing to do with me. We have our sorts. We're doing by country, by car, by model. On your by levels, you can add additional options such as subtotal. So if I want to do by country subtotal and get a line that says the total for that country, we can do that. You can add subheads and subfoots. Subfeet? Subfoots.
Subfoots.
Then we have our filtering where country equals England or Japan. Notice I have a comment in here. If is a simple test for values in a single field. So you can do an if test. So I can say if country equals England or Japan, and that would work. But if I had anything complex where I said if country equals another field, I couldn't do that using an if because I can't do field to field. I can only do field to value or list of values. I can't do complex. I can't say where country equals England and model equals TR7. Can't do that with an if because it's a complex expression. I have to use a where in that condition. And then I have my heading. Notice again, I'm putting it at the bottom. I guess I'll explain now. I put it at the bottom because if you reference fields in your heading, we add them to the sort matrix. So in this example, we have some dealer cost, retail cost. So dealer cost, retail cost goes into the matrix. And then we compute profit from dealer cost, retail cost. Since those two fields are already in the matrix, we don't need to add them again. So then we're going to add profit. If I had a heading that used dealer cost, then the heading would put that field in the matrix. So if the order matters, if you're using any type of C notation, where you're saying C1 plus C2, where it goes into the matrix is important. So normally you're going to do a calculation with C notation based on the fields, your verb objects. So that's why I put the heading at the end. That way, any fields that I happen to reference aren't going to offset what I'm seeing in the column notation. All right. Heading, we also have a footing. We have to finish it with an end. So here's the entire request all together, and we run it, and here's our output. Any questions? It's a quiet group today. I can add on-table settings. So we have set commands that you can do outside of the table request, but there is some that you can also do within the table request that is only valid for when that table request runs. So in this case, I'm saying on table set page, no page. Let me go back. Because if you notice, the very first line in my output says page 1. So if I do on table set page, no page, and rerun it, that line is now gone. There is no page. And then we could add styling. Here I'm adding the EN warm style. So when I run, I get this output, which is a little cleaner.
Walter, you want to just comment about the lack of repetition of England or Jaguar in these cases? And the data values themselves?
Okay. So when you're doing buys, especially multiple buys, we will not replicate the value of the buy. We'll show it on the first line, but then we will not show it on additional lines in the same grouping. Now, if you want to see it, then you can set by display equals on.
Right.
Is it by display?
Yes.
If you go to something like Excel, did we turn it on automatically for Excel SX, which we probably really should?
I don't think we do. I think you have to put it on.
So if you go into Excel and you want to see the data on every line, you most likely are going to see this turned on, or you might want to turn it on. So it's set by display equals on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different settings because you can do across too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's it. Oh, we got lots of things coming in here. Let's see. Is there a way to view the internal matrix? Why would you want to? The best way to view the internal matrix would be to go just to a hold file.
Right. Just
say on table hold, don't give it a format, don't give it anything else. You might want to give it a name though, if you don't want to call it name. You don't call it hold. Give it a name, Ha ha ha.
Haha, very funny, Doug.
Somebody said only if you are Neo.
Yeah, Neo.
So for those of you that think it's a Matrix reference from the
Right.
movie.
I wonder if it bends the same way. Huh.
So if you go to just a hold file, what happens is you'll see all of the columns that are created in the matrix. So you'll see the ones, even if you, like in the compute, if I computed profit equals dealer cost and retail cost, but I never mentioned those as a verb object, your matrix will have three fields. It'll have retail cost, dealer cost, and profit, because we'll show you all the fields that are used to make up the compute. Okay, good question. And there's another one in the QA. You can also use multiple if conditions. So yeah, so I said that you can't use if you have a complex expression, or if car equals, if country equals England and model equals TR7. I can't do that with an if, but I can do it with two ifs because it's an and condition. I can say if country equals England, and then another if that says if model equals TR.
And that's an and.
And
Yeah.
there's an implied and between the two ifs. But if you had an or, then you definitely couldn't do that way.
Now, the other thing with the manipulating the matrix, hold list gives you a rudimentary way of manipulating what's actually going to be output from the hold. Everything in the matrix goes into the hold, but what comes out of it is going to be controlled by hold list. So that if you wanted to only see the printed fields, hold list can be set to print only, and effectively what will come out, what will be available in the hold file when you actually write it out, will only be the files that were actually printed. They're visible. Anything that was no printed does not show up. Anything that was duplicated as a result of a computer, something like that, does not show up.
Yeah, only what you would see on a final report would show up if you do hold list equals print only.
Right. So there's a way there you can, and that's a way to actually manipulate the matrix in terms, because the matrix is basically it's a central point that we move to. Everything that all the selection and sort goes into the matrix, and then we literally query the matrix and do the output. So.
Okay. All right, moving on. So when you run a report request, what happens? The first thing that WebFOCUS does is locates the file descriptions, the masters, and we also make sure that we have access to the data files. So if I can't find a master, you'll get an error. If I can't find the data, or if it's not allocated, depending on certain circumstances, you may or may not get an error. You might just get an empty report. Then we will select records based on database values. So this isn't as important if you're doing relational reporting. So if all of your table requests are coming from SQL, any type of SQL Server or MySQL or Oracle, this doesn't really come into play as much. But if you're doing a focus managed join, say a focus file to a flat file or another focus file, we're going to select records based on database values. So you want your where conditions, your if conditions, to be real fields that are in the synonym, not defined fields. Why, you ask? Well, I'm going to get right there. Can you use SQL pass-through table and master file tables together in the reporting file? Okay, hold that question. Once we say we're keeping this record based on the real database fields, then we will go and evaluate all of your defined fields. We will only evaluate defined fields that you are using in your request. So if you have a defined file car and you have 1,000 calculations, but you're only using one of them, we're only going to evaluate that one expression. We're not going to do all 1,000. So you can have it defined, but as long as you're not using it, you're not taking up any processing time. Once we determine the values of the defined fields, then we can then go and say, oh, am I keeping this record based on any filtering on the defined fields? So if you can knock out the record from the second step rather than the fourth step, especially if you're doing millions of records, it's going to be a lot more efficient. Then we're going to sort the data. So we're going to sort and aggregate. That's the creating of the internal matrix to prepare individual and/or aggregated values. And then once we have the internal matrix, then we can do the computed fields, because most of your computes are going to be dependent upon the values of the aggregated values at the different sort levels. Then you can have where total tests, where the aggregated values meet a certain criteria. We also have, it's called where group by,
Where underscore grouped.
Where underscore grouped,
Right.
where I can do a where condition only based on the group level, not on the total value.
Right.
And then we finally, at the final end, we format the report. So if you're creating a report from scratch and you want to figure out if you're getting what you want, the recommendation is don't worry about the formatting right away. If you're coding by hand, if you're going through the tools, you get some basic formatting already starting, so you're a little step ahead. But just get the output you want with the fields you want, and then once you have the data, then you can worry about putting the formatting in after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, can you use SQL pass-through table and master tables together? So you can do pass-through. So there's different flavors of pass-through, I'll call it. If you just do SQL and then let's say SQL Aura, if you're going against Aura, and then you have your select statement, that you cannot use with another master. But what you can do is you can create a view, or I call it a focus view. So you say SQL Aura, and then it's prepare, and then you give it a view name, and then an as, and then you give it the select code. So at that point, the query hasn't actually run. You're not bringing back data yet. You're just creating the query that would get the data, and then you can then use the my view that you created, and then join that to another table. And I got it. Okay, good. I'm thinking now I must create a master file table built with pass-through. Okay, so if you have a select statement, you can store it in your application directory as a .sql, and then you can use the create synonym to create a synonym for you based on that SQL that you generated, and it'll run it as it'll create the synonym for you on the fly, and it makes life a lot easier. So if you already have SQL, put it in a .sql in your application directory, and then you should be able to create a new synonym from that.
Yeah, and to add to get it even a little bit more crazy, you can actually write an SQL request and throw a semicolon on, and then actually open table as the command and issue a table command, and work on from that point you're in focus. So you're mixing both SQL and the SQL, what you'll get back from the SQL, and you can run table requests against that, especially, and that can be very useful as well, so that you have the ability to format stuff directly.
And I go over that I think later in the year sometime.
Okay.
But that one you can't do joins on.
No.
All right, that's all I have. Oh, wait.
All
right, so at the end of my slide, I have what we call the quick reference guide. So this used to be a little fold out from people that have been with the product a long time.
40
So it's just basic syntax. So table file name, you got your header. Again, I put my header at the bottom. Your header text, and then your commands, your computes, your acrosses, your buys, different options for the buys. If you don't put the option directly on the buy, you can say on sort field and then put the options after the fact. Where total. We got record limit, read limit. If you're doing testing and you want to bring back all the records, a lot of stuff in here. So I'm putting this in here just so you have it for reference. Now that's the end. There we go.
All right. Okay, just a couple of quick little comments. And I'm sure you'll hear this from us constantly. There's a big difference between defines and computes. They're both calculations, but they occur at a different time. They're done on different, in effect, a different subset of data.
All right, so let me go back, and then because I think that's on this slide.
Right. Okay.
So the defines are done on the third step as we read the data.
Right.
And the computes are done after the internal matrix is created, after everything's summed and sorted, just before we go to the final report and do the where total test if you have them.
Right. So for typical, I mean, if you're doing some kind of a calculation to determine how to format something, you probably want to restrict, you want to limit that to a compute. You probably don't want to be doing that on a define, right? The simple fact is that typically with defines, you're going to be running on every data you read. All the data that you read, you're going to be doing some sort of a calculation potentially. Computes, you're doing only what's in the matrix, which especially in the case of an aggregate report is going to be considerably smaller. So from a performance point of view, even if you have a calculation where you're doing some sort of a real aggregation, you're calculating something. If you can do it in the compute, do it in the compute. You're going to save a ton of time, all right? And that's not insignificant, especially in our world when we're dealing with a mainframe where you're dealing hundreds of millions of rows at a time. Yes, absolutely, because that's serious performance. So that's something to think about constantly. If you can do it in the compute, do it in the compute, right? That's a biggie. The other thing that we will typically remind you of is that by and across is really, in our world, a very low-level by. So just think of it when you're working with it as a very low-level by. You have high-order bys, which are and at the very bottom, crosses are actually start out life as the very low-level by, and by the time we get to display, they're flipped up into that horizontal as opposed to a vertical display. But they start out life as a very low-level by. So if you think of that, it'll help you work with the crosses. Okay.
So will the slides be shared? No. Why would we do that? Hannah, will we email you the slides and will they go out next week like they normally do, or when we were doing it on WebEx?
Yep, happy to do that. They will
Cool.
go out and we'll send out the recording.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We'll make sure you get them. So yes, they will be shared.
Okay. Anything further on that? Dive into, let's see, let me do my share. And I want to share number 1 because that's where it lives. And let's go over to here. Let's run this. And Mr. Bringle, I expect you to pipe in as you wish on this one.
Uh-oh, you opened the door.
There we go. No, absolutely. Historically, we've had lots of presentations that have been done, and one of the series that was very, very well thought of, a lot of people loved, and we're kind of resurrecting the things you can use. This was originally started by Rob Palmer a long, long, long time ago. Rob and I got doing this together for a long time. I moved into the Hidden Gems. So this is really about the kinds of things that exist in the product that you can use if you know about. And ultimately, that's what it's about. It's really about, if you know about it, you can use it. Here we go. Am I going to be talking about all this today? No, I'm not. So let's just start off. Let's talk about set parameters. What are set parameters? They're things that allow us to change the behavior of the product as we're moving along. All right. And they have nothing to do with the individual code that I'm working with, but they are a set command. They're an environmental command that I can issue and change things. And some of them can be very important to use. Some of them make life a lot easier. So let's just zip through some of these. Set 0. When we normally display data, Normally when we display, our send zero is defaulted to off. We don't put a 0 in front of that dot before the decimal point. If you want it, send 0 equals on, and it's automatically there, and you don't have to worry about it. All right. Something to think about where this could be put in as a part of the request. It could be put into a profile. It's the kind of thing that you can force. Okay. Cursim. How do I control my currency symbols when I'm using M and N as my numeric formats, my data, my edit characters to indicate that I've got currency, right? We do currency now in a lot of different ways, and this is the original way that we did it. It's still out there. M and N basically were floating in a fixed currency symbol. The question is, what symbol? All right, defaults to $sign. Yeah, well, people in Japan are not thrilled about seeing $signs, and the same thing with the people in England. They're not too thrilled with seeing $signs. They want to see a £sign. Cursim basically is there to allow you to set the symbol to be whatever you would like, and that's now supported. Count with. If you're familiar with the verb count, we not only have sum and print, we also have something called count. And you're familiar with the CNT dot prefix. That's a count. We're actually counting there. It's a different form of aggregation. We're counting instances, we don't care about the data value. We're caring about the existence of the instance. Normally, our count width, when we're counting things, has a default value of 5. So when you count bigger than 5 digits, sometimes we're gonna throw, you'll all of a sudden see asterisks. Those asterisks can be changed. You can set that to 9 by setting count width equals on, and that will set it to a much larger number. Now you'll notice that the size of the column also increases, so you gotta be a little careful about that. Direct hold. If you're doing hold format focus and you're dealing with an older version, direct hold was added so that we would write it directly without going through the normal modify process that was used to create hold format focus files. For the most part, you don't need to worry about this. All right, okay. If you're a focus user using an older version of product, if you're pre 7.6, you've still got the old hold format focus, which is table file, and then table file the data, then modify it into to the whole file, into the focus file. And that's a 2-step process, takes a lot of time. Direct hold was added to get rid of that, get rid of modify and write it directly into the focus file, which is a lot simpler. You can see the actual number of reads that we end up having to do is considerably smaller. So it's a performance thing. Duplicate column. Some sales by country. Can I do that? Sure. I can have a lot of verbs when I'm working with focus. I don't have to have just one. I can have multiple levels of verbs. Question is, what do I do with them when I have this? When I see some sales and some sales by country, I would normally see sales and then sales and then country and sales. All right. Because the by field is the initial by field for some sales. There is no by field. So that's the first one. Then I have a by field. That's actually coming up second. The country is the by field and the sales is the object. So I can actually build this. Now, is this the only way to display this? Well, no. As a matter of fact, it's not. This basically is the default. If I turn the default, if I set duplicate col off, in other words, I don't want duplicate columns. I want this displayed as rows. And you can see what we do. We will automatically turn this into instead of being column display, it'll turn into a row display, which is actually kind of interesting. By display, we talked about by display. All right, by display on and off. See, we fill in the blanks for you. Anything that we suppressed is a matter of the trying to give you a sparser report, make it easier to read, make it easier to isolate where the differences are. If you need that, Excel, you definitely want it with Excel and XLSX. DM precision. Dialog Manager. In Dialog Manager, how do you get decimal points? Well, it's a good question. For a long time, we didn't have decimal points in Dialog Manager. If you were playing with numbers, it was truncated. It was truncated down to the whole number because effectively all we had was integers. And that's primarily because all dialog manager dealt with was a string, and it didn't have any concept of a part of a value, part of one, so it would just cut that off. We now support decimals in Dialog Manager, and that includes in the calculations you're doing in Dialog Manager, and you can actually set it. It's defaults off so that you don't get it. If you set it to a number, that's going to be the number of decimal points that you get. And it's actually fairly simple if you run some simple tests on it. You can see that we truncate. We do a simple test here, and the difference is like night and day. All right. So if you need to retain decimal precision inside a Dialog Manager, you don't have to play games anymore. You can do it directly. DM precision equals 1, and you've got control over the number of precisions. All right, drill down. Target frame actually lets me specify a name. All right, default is going to be the current frame name, but I can specify something else if I want to. All right. All right. Across PRT. You ever notice how sometimes when I've got an across report, I've got an enormous amount of empty space? What do we call it? Measles. It's got the chicken pox. The report basically has a lot of dots. They're basically no data. They're the no data dots that show up as a result of doing an across. And that's normal for an across. Now, the question is that display helpful? No, probably not. There is a way, if you've got a lot of this, to actually change it so that you get rid of the extra dots, right? And across PRT compress will actually bring that all to the top. It'll literally take, and if you take a look at just in England I have, I think, 4 different rows in the normal. In the second one, I've only got 2 rows because I only have 2 rows that have displays in it. That's effectively what we do. We literally bring the display up to the top row. This is a display-only functionality. It helps you basically read the data, all right, rather than having to contend with the fact that there's lots of different, how do I know where things are? And by compressing it, we're actually making it easier to work with. Cross PRT, and this is compressing it. As names, hold list, and hold adder. All right. This affects, and we mentioned this briefly, playing with a matrix, okay? It affects the contents of the whole files and the master files that are created for the whole files. Whole files generally always have master created. There are some that don't, but most of them do. As names basically will allow me to add the as names to the whole file. Normally they don't. And you end up with some crazy naming conventions. The default is focus, which allows you for focus files, but you can actually set it on, in which case we'll take the as names for whatever you specify in the request and use them as in the whole file. Whole list allows you to keep non-printed columns out of the whole file. They're basically taking them out. So you have all print only and all keys. All keys basically show you all of your by fields, even if they are not referenced. If you no printed them, there's a lot of cases where that. If you want to see those, you can actually make sure that those show up as well. And hold adder basically carries the field attributes from the master file into the whole file, and things like title can be title. It's a big one that comes in. This is a way to bring the title into the report, and that's actually pretty useful. Everything is defaulted here, which means nothing is carried. As names on, utilization comes in as utilization. Print only basically prints only the names of that I'm using in the request. In this particular case, I'm only using 3 fields, so not all 5 show up, only 3. And the hold adder brings the titles along with it. So that's actually very useful. It also affects the field names of across columns. All right, and notice that, and this is always an issue with as names basically off. If I do across sales, I'm going to end up with a lot of columns called sales. Not useful because I then have to know and use the EO1, EO2 names. Royal pain. Much easier to use this to turn the as names on, in which case all of a sudden you've got a prefix that's going to be put on each one in order to make sure that you have know what it is. We take the first 3 letters from the field, and we then literally join that to the data value itself, and that becomes a field name. Kind of cool. All right. Any questions about sets? Now, sets are, if you're in App Studio, no problem. All right. You've got a set tool. You can get to them. You can see a lot of them. If you're not in App Studio, or you don't have command line access so that you can get to the code, it's a little bit more problematic. Angie, do we have any in terms of discovery, the discovery tool? Are we going to be adding in a full-blown set?
Yeah, I am super glad you asked that question, because in our next release, WebFOCUS 9.3.0, we are adding the ability to create some of these set commands. I'll say no promises on the exact ones that you showed today, if they are all there, but we are adding many of them and more coming soon.
Good, good. I mean, the terrifying thing is that there's like 500 or 600 of these things.
Yep.
And
Yeah, so that's why I'm not promising any exact one for sure, but we tried to hit the most common ones, definitely, and then we'll keep expanding on them as needed.
Okay, yeah, they're very useful for taking care of. I mean, some of them, as you can see, one simple set like the set 0 takes care of all the data values for all your reports, and you don't have to worry about it. If you had to actually go in and try to figure out coding it, you probably could, but you probably wouldn't want. I mean, you could build a define to do that or compute, but do you want to do that? No, not if you don't have to. It's very simple. We did it for you. Okay, let's take a look at, yeah.
So somebody asked, is mixed also available?
Yes.
Or just in WebFOCUS, and that's for the as names?
No, mixed is available everywhere.
So as of like 7709 and higher,
right,
even 7703, pretty much any setting you can do a WebFOCUS, you can do on mainframe focus.
Yeah.
So in the current version, we have for as names on, off, focus if you want to use the standard focus.
Right.
We have mixed, and we have flip. So if you're doing a relational table and you don't want to use the EO1 for the table column, you can flip it, and then it would be the field name, and then the alias would be the actual column name.
Right. Yeah. The relational engines require the alias to be the real name. Okay, that's the way our interfaces have always worked. So it's critical to have the real field name in the alias. And
no, but if you're going to a hold file, you can call it whatever you want, and calling it EO1, EO2, EO3 is not undoable, but this doesn't make sense.
That's true. There aren't a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Most of the questions can be, if you want to do further research, you can look at the Developing Applications Manual or the Creating Reports Manual.
All right, I can't see the.
Is there any chance of getting IntelliSense added into App Studio so that when one is typing an AMPER parameter name, it will bring up the list of parameters to select that would save a ton of typing? Angie?
So we probably are looking at it for App Studio. However, if you're using WebFOCUS and you have the text editor open from the hub, there is some IntelliSense in there. It is mostly centered around the focus language things. So if I start typing table file, it'll help me fill in some of those things. I would have to look into if it's extended to the parameter names, but if it's not, I think that's a great suggestion for the future. So we'll definitely look into it.
Cool.
And Sandy mentions that set options can be also displayed via $set all, which will show you all of a lot of them. You can also use the FMI table, the sysset.
Right.
And you can run a table request against all the settings. It'll show you the current values, and it will also let you query what the default values are.
Yeah. Actually, that is the best list. The best way to list is the sysset. It's the suffix equals FMI, which is a standard kind of a master file that you now have access to. It's a focus. Actually, it was a focus managed interface, and it's a focus master file interface. It allows you to query the master files, and actually a good deal more as if they were data files. So it's very useful.
All right,
And
so
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was going to go into another question, so I'll let you
Go ahead.
finish.
Another question.
I recently had a need to put a heading and footing in a CSV file, and it's kind of odd because I was working with Chinmay, who was working with I think Mansoor on this, something similar. Is this something you would consider adding WebFOCUS as an option? The only problem with that I see is your comment limited is based on the verb objects. So if I have 10 verb objects, I'm going to have what, 9 commas, or whatever the limiter is. And your header usually only has maybe 1 or 2 pieces of information. You're not going to have the whole thing. So it gets a little difficult to have one master record read the whole thing, unless you have something with a rect type, but then that gets a little more complicated.
Actually, if you think about it, that's probably the only way. That's the way they used to do it with headers. You know, they would have multiple record types. In the case of a CSV file, what you've got is basically just data, right? At best, we're going to basically give you a single row at the top that will give you the names of the columns. All right, and we only do that to facilitate reading the data. All right, so you have some idea of what the columns are, but it's a data file.
We're being challenged here. Excel reads with no problem.
Excel reads CSVs. That's right. It does.
But you're not creating a report from the data in the CSV. You're just reading it.
Right. Now, if you want to, now he wants to read data that's in a CSV format and it has headings in it, or he wants
he wants to create a CSV and have a header and footer record. What do you think, Angie?
Yeah, so far I think I agree with your comments. I'm not entirely like column headings and the field names, absolutely makes sense to me. And I think if I'm just visualizing it on the screen, like the output can have headings and footings, but I'm mostly going to be viewing that in a browser or in Excel, like actual XLSX format, which we support.
Right.
And so the headings or footings in CSV, I guess let me know more on the use case, because I'm having trouble understanding that one.
Yeah.
Do we have time? Can we unmute Barry and get more info, or do we want to take this offline?
We're going till 1. We got a few more minutes if you want. I think it's. I mean, from my point of view, I think unlike most other things, we generate a master file when we create a CSV. All right, so it's not just the basic CSV kind of a thing. Common COM T and tab T and defix are all delimited file formats and
created for reuse. Yeah.
Right. Now, if you want to add that kind of, I mean, could you do it? Yeah, actually, yes. You could actually, you could probably get pretty creative, and if I'm not mistaken, we could probably generate that using, could we, MacGyver?
Well, the thing is, what are you putting? So I asked Chinmay to find out what you were putting, or whoever this customer was putting into the header. Right. Because a lot of times you put in the number of records in the output file. So that way, whatever's reading it will know, I know I'd have to read 18 records. So I'm going to make sure I have 18. And if I have more, I'm going to throw some type of error. So if there's some sort of processing that has to be done before you put the header, then it might be a lot more difficult. If it's only text, this is the first record in the CSV file, then I mean, right now you should be doing it with probably a dash right or put DDREC or something along those lines.
Yeah, which you could do.
But again, if there's any type of calculation, Hannah, let's unmute. Let's ask Barry. Would you mind unmuting, or if we ask you?
There he is. Do we have to unmute him? There we go.
I think he's already. Barry?
All right. Wait, he looks unmuted.
Yeah, he's unmuted.
He's shy.
Let me see. I'm gonna change him to a panelist for a moment.
Okay.
Just made a comment. I don't have a microphone connected, so.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fine. All right. We'll take this offline. No,
Likely
but
Yep,
story.
absolutely.
all right. And
All right,
Barry,
Barry.
do us a favor. When you hit the evaluation at the end of this, please just indicate that you'd like to talk to us about this and remind us so that we can follow up. Okay. All right. Anything else?
And if your case is the one that I've been helping with, let me know that too. If you have a current case open.
Is that did we cover the chat?
Yep, I think wait, more QA. Oh yeah, that's everybody. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Let's continue along. Now, am I sharing still? I'm good, right?
You are good.
Okay. Let's just quickly some stuff about reporting, and this is just some simple things. The use of table F. We have table, and Walter showed you what table is. There's also something called table F, which is slightly different. It does everything the table does, except it does some of it a little differently. And especially if we're using a relational database, because a relational database can do sorts much faster than we can. And in some cases, if they're doing the sort, we don't want to be doing the sort. And if that's the case, you want to use table F, because table F will not do a sort. All right. So if you know you're going against a relational database that's going to do the sort, it's going to optimize, then you want to use table F so that you don't have to worry about doing the sort twice. That's a performance issue. Now you can actually see what's going on using the RDBMS by using SQL trace and question mark stats. All right. In which case you'll see whether the internal matrix is created and which sort was actually used. All right. If the RDBMS is going to do the work, let it do the work. Right. Table F, no sorting is done by our side. No internal matrix is created, and that's not entirely correct. We actually do create it just to catch the data on the way back. But the report comes, we're not doing any sorting with it. We're just catching it and then immediately writing it out. So the report comes in faster. Some recording commands inside a table actually require table, and you've got to watch out for those. Those will force it. Things like match forces it. More is going to force it. There's a way to you will be warned about that if this happens. You'll get an error message or a warning message that says that it's happening. SQL TOP-TTF automatically turns table to table F. We default this to on all the time. So we're always looking to turn table into table F because it's faster. All right. And you can verify that using the trace and the stats, question mark stat. All right. Conditional joins, my favorite. Joins don't have to be released based on equality tests. All right. As a matter of fact, relational tests generally are doing joins in effect as they're not doing them as equality tests. Okay. We can use the where test basically inside of a conditional join to do any kind of relation test for any kind of relation we want. Now, this is really interesting and really powerful and can be very, very expensive in terms of performance. So be careful. All right. Especially when you're doing things, when you're looking for things that are not something. All right. Because there tend to be, in some cases, a lot more than you expect and can really seriously change your performance. So watch out for those. But they do give you the ability to actually search on a range, which is to join on a range, can be a very powerful technique. You can build this directly in. Sorry for the visual. This is an old visual. It's the same concept. You literally build this inside of the expression builder. The join is actually going to go out and build a where, and that's actually what we're doing. We're building the where in to do the join, right? The where clause that we build is going to be passable to SQL and will be passed to SQL. Now, dynamic formatting. You can dynamically format a field. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I've got numbers that are coming into me, and I've got a report, and the report is such that I've got numbers in the same column that are going to be pounds or yen or dollars, rupees. How do I deal with that in terms of the format? And that format, I mean specifically, how do I get the right currency symbol on it? Well, you can do that using a dynamic format, which effectively allows you to use a define field as the field that determines the format. You define what the format is going to be, and you basically build it as a define, and you use that as the test, as the format for the field in the request. All right. This allows you to actually build a business however you want. You can lay it out so the fields are going to be displayed in any way that you want, or actually the columns are going to be displayed in any way you want. So that's actually very powerful and quite useful. You're going to basically build it using a compute. Okay, we're doing this after the fact because we don't want to do it on every field. We want to do it after the fact, so we're going to use the compute. And we're going to build what the format that we want. We're going to detect it, and we're going to use a different format, but depending upon the field that we're actually looking at. And this will allow me to then take a look, and depending upon the field that I'm actually looking at, I'm going to have a different format. Now, in this case, I'm actually looking at massive. These are completely different data values. It's not necessarily numbers just being different types of currency. These are radically different. We got some currency, we got a percentage, and we have a count, some sort of units. So this gets extremely powerful, all right, in terms of display. All right, that's enough for today. Yeah, and that works out.
Good timing.
Well. Perfect timing. All right. Any questions? Any more questions? All right. All right. Well, if we have no more questions, I want to thank you all for joining us today.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, join me next month. Walter will be on a cruise drinking. He'll be having Mai Tais while we work through some interesting stuff. All right. So join us next month.
I hope to see you all in April at the first summit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rub it in.
And that's in Boston, right?
yes, it's
In
in
Boston.
Boston.
That's in Boston.
Then Boston.
And we'll remind you again next month about it.
Yeah, Boston, actually. It'll be fun.
Great.
Right. Barry wants to know how he can get printed manual on WebFOCUS release 9. You can go to techsupport.ibi.com and then do a search on the manual name,
Documentation. Yeah.
and then you should be able to download it from there in the PDF format.
Now
Yeah,
yeah.
You go to ibi.com, and then it's actually under customers up at the top bar. You'll see customers, and then you'll see get help, and you have like support, you have e-delivery, you have documentations. You'll see what you need there under that drop down.
Cool.
Cool.
All right.
right.
Thanks everyone for coming. I think we got everything. Yep.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Walters, for having me.
Yeah, please fill out the evaluation. The evaluation is going to appear as another link after
An external link.
Yeah. External link. So please go to it and give us an evaluation. We appreciate your comments. If you have any questions, that's a place to ask them, and we'll get back to you either directly or we'll bring it into next month's discussion. So
When you go to exit the webinar, it should pop up as a link for you to go to. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys.
Fernando, we'll take a look and see what we can do about optimization, and because I think we have the second half of the year still to plan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.